Hey, it's John Hope Bryant, founder of Operation Hope. I'm here at the U.S. Comptroller of the Currency's office in Washington, D.C. The Comptroller of the Currency dates back to the 1800s and regulates, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think $12 trillion of assets, about 70% of the banking sector. Is that right?
That's right.
And FYI, nice little factoid, there was a comptroller that won the Nobel Peace Prize, was it the 1800s?
1921.
And frankly, I'd like to inspire this comptroller to want to do such noble work that he wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize too. Let's start there. So we should want all of our public servants to be the best version of themselves they can be. So on that note, we're talking about CRA, Community Reinvestment Act, and CRA as a proposed CRA reform and all of the misinformation that's out there about it and trying to provide clarity through clarity. Just like straight up, no scripting, direct answers. You have the entire leadership team here, and we'll do version 1. And if you like this, we'll do version 2 if you have more questions. So the U.S. Comptroller of the Currency, the man, the Honorable Joseph Otting is here. I've known him for 20 years. I know him to be an honorable person. We don't agree on everything, but we agree on the things that matter most. He's an authentic human being, and he's never lied to me in my entire life. We ain't gonna start tonight. And just, just give you a little window into him as a person. When he first got this job, he asked me my ideas about, what CRA should be doing. And I got expansive and said things like, well, why can't there be internships? And why can't corporations, banks, companies get credit, in this case banks, for CRA? Frankly, why couldn't a regulator do internships? And he said, well, why aren't we doing it? And I said, well, good luck on that. They have an internship program in Ward 7, Ward 8. They started with, they challenged the staff to do this. Nobody knows this. And the staff said, yeah, maybe by 2021. Not this staff. And the comptroller said, no, what about like now, like in 2 months? Anyway, they had 80 young people, paid them $20 an hour, gave them suits, a housing stipend, not a housing stipend, like transportation stipend, a food stipend.
Yep.
Clothing stipend, $20 an hour.
Yeah.
Gave them real jobs, working in this building, giving them an opportunity to go from the streets to the suites. And it got so successful, they're doing it again this year. Today we're out with Mayor Bowser here in DC, who says she claims she loves you. That's a whole other thing. Because of this program, the FDIC, the OCC, there are 2 or 3 other
CFPB, NCUA,
and a couple other agencies committed a couple hundred interns, up from 80 now, same criteria, $20 an hour. And she thinks this is a model for the whole country. That what she's doing, this is the mayor of DC. That just gives you a window into him as a human being. It has nothing to do with the topic today, but I think that context matters. The comptroller is going to introduce, well, I'll let him introduce himself, but everybody else is going to introduce themselves. And I wanted to say one special thing about this lady here. Rebecca is the most senior African American at the OCC. I'm right about that, right?
One of, yes. I think that's
She's
right.
being humble.
She's 2 of the 2.
2 of the 2?
Yes.
She's a bad sister, let's just say that. And some people have suggested that she's out of the loop in CRA reform. And my understanding is she can be further in the loop. She is the loop. And just to start with this, I asked her like weeks ago, if you have to think about this in the context of your forefathers and your foremothers, the people who came before you in that little town, and was it South Carolina?
North
Carolina. Little poor town in North Carolina.
Absolutely.
And if you got to think about your mom and dad, your aunts, your grandparents, going all the way back to the days, real talk, of slavery, that my grandparents were slaves, certainly my great-grandparents.
Right.
And everything I do is, am I going to make them proud of me or not? And I asked you that question, like, do you think they'd be proud of what you're doing with CRA reform? Do you have any questions whatsoever? What was your response to me?
So I grew up in a rural town in North Carolina.
Speak up just a little bit, make sure you hear you.
So I grew up in a rural North Carolina, and North Carolina has 100 counties. My county where I grew up is number 100 out of that 100 in poverty.
So it is the highest rate of poverty in North Carolina.
It absolutely
Yeah.
is. And what I know is the commitment that I have, that my colleagues here have, to make sure that the Community Reinvestment Act meets the goal of the statute, which is to make sure that banks have a responsibility to lend to all of their communities, but with an emphasis on low and moderate income communities and income individuals. And the work that I do here with these folks today is a reflection of a commitment that I have to my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, who spent their lives invested in making sure that the communities that they serve, a high school principal and a Southern Presbyterian minister, that they would impact those communities. And I think they would be absolutely proud that I'm trying to carry on that tradition that I watched and benefited from all my life.
So this is no less important than the role of the pastor in the church in the neighborhood you grew up in, or the grandmothers who raised somebody else's children. You're a caretaker for a legacy, and you feel proud of what you have done, the work you've done on this reform.
I feel proud to have the opportunity to be a part of an organization that can impact lives across this country.
Yeah, this goes to humility again. She spread it around. But see, that to me is what I call her a real sister. SISTA. She's a real person, and she's smart as a whip, and she wouldn't do anything she didn't believe in. Now that's my introduction. Let's let you give your proper credentials based on your title, then we'll go to Bay and then to Perry. Your credentials.
All right, so I'm Gravetta Gardenier. I'm the Senior Deputy Comptroller for Bank Supervision Policy here at the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency.
Did you get all that? Translation, she's in charge. Okay.
I'm Bao Win. I am the Principal Deputy Chief Counsel, and I work for Gravetta on this project, so I definitely know she's in charge.
And Bao looks like he's 16. I can tell you, he is. You don't want to mess with him. He is smart.
And you know, John, Bala has a great story about coming to America.
Make sure you speak up. Make sure you speak up as well.
Yeah, I said Bala has a great story about coming to America, and Bala, why don't you share your story as well?
Yeah, and I would say Gravetta and I have talked about this a lot as we've been on this project. I'm also a proud North Carolinian from Eastern North Carolina. I grew up in a small rural town, but my family immigrated to the United States, and we lived on welfare when I was growing up. So being able to work on this project and being able to say I'm having an impact in helping kids like me and putting money back into the community is a huge deal. And you know, we've sort of talked about it, and I think many times Gravetta and I have been emotional about
I hear
what we're doing
your voice now.
in this space, because it's I think we're doing real good for not only you know, the industry that we're serving, but I think for real everyday Americans living in forgotten places across the country, places that we both grew up in. And it's an incredible privilege to know that you're able to, I think at the end of this process, hopefully change lives, because we're going to be able to say we did something that helped financial institutions put real dollars back into their communities that they're serving.
And you're an attorney, right?
Yes.
I never heard an attorney get emotional and almost, I almost tear up on and a government attorney on top of that. It's almost an oxymoron. And again, I don't want to interrupt you, but make sure we speak up so that people. We're going to get into details here. For anybody watching this, you say we ain't going to get to the meat. We're about to get to it right now. I want you to know who they are before we start talking about what we're doing, because as you deal with people matter, and I trust these people. We're going to get into really micro details about this reform and hopefully clear up a lot of this information and hopefully add some stuff from some creative ideas that you're going to add to make this even better, because the process is open.
That's right.
We'll call it a comment period. Barry.
I'm Barry Whitus. I'm Deputy Comptroller for Community
You guys
Affairs.
hear his voice? I am somebody.
I am Barry Whitus, Deputy Comptroller for Community Affairs. I work with Gravetta. in administering the Community Reinvestment Act. I've been doing this here at the OCC for about 20 years, and I see great opportunities for us to improve the CRA administration with banks and with communities across the country by introducing metrics and making it clear to the banks that we supervise and the community developers around the country what it is that a bank's objectives are in terms of achieving its CRA performance. I came to the OCC from Freddie Mac back in the 90s when we had very specific goals under Congress as to how much affordable housing we would do at Freddie Mac, and I was very surprised when I came here, and it was not quantitative driven at all. It was driven by qualitative factors, and it really has created a lot of confusion by banks over the years as to how much CRA activity they need to do to meet their objectives and what counts for CRA. So those are the two main things that we're trying to do here with CRA modernization, and I'm really proud to be a part of the effort.
So let me jump into it. Let's deal with, I'm going to list some misperceptions that I've heard, that they've heard.
So John, could I just frame up for people in the audience
Yeah.
the process? So
Yeah.
I think it's important to recognize that the journey of modernizing CRA has really been about a 10-year project. Back in 2007, there was GRIPA, which is a report that goes to Congress that described about all the things that people in the communities across America wanted to have fixed in CRA. That was also repeated in 2017, a similar report, very consistent themes. Then we started the process actually in early 2018 of looking at the details of CRA and how we could improve it. And then Treasury issued a report in April of 2018 making recommendations, and then we issued what we call an advance notice of proposed rulemaking in 2018, where we asked about 37 questions to which we got 1,500 respondents. So this has been a long process in coming. Then in December of this year, or excuse me, December of 2019, we issued what's called a notice of proposed rulemaking. And from that, we filed in the Federal Register that came out on January 9th that we will accept comments on the notice of proposed rulemaking until March 9th of 2020. And so when John talks about it, hey, this is the open time, it really is. We've put this out so we can get great feedback from people about how do we finalize this final rule sometimes in May or June of this year. And so what you're hearing from is people have put their heart and soul into this project, because it's not that we get it done, it's that we get it done to the best of our ability. This has not been touched since 1995. And if you think about any rule or a car you drove in 1995 or a computer you had in 1995, you would never in today's environment be using that same product, but we're stuck with an old rule.
Yeah. Which, by the way, has been very meaningful and helpful. Even the Operation Hope, if it wasn't for CRA, I would not have Operation Hope. It wasn't for CRA, the small dollar loan that started, that we got, a line of credit for $25,000 from a little bank in 1992. They would have never done that without, they would not put the energy into it without getting credit for CRA. We make sure that stuff like that continues to be supported. The work we do around Hope Inside, banks initially said, we don't know if we get credit for that under the current CRA, so we're not doing it. I had to go and go to each of the agencies, get them to say, yeah, that qualifies, write a letter through what's called the FFIEC, all the joint regulatory groups. Barry was involved with that. And I had to take that letter around to each of my investors in the vision. And now we're in 30 states, 150 locations. But now the issue is, okay, we producing all this data. They're not sure the data is actually gets credit for CRA, because the list, I didn't know it, there's no list anywhere of what gets credit or not, even though we're moving credit scores, in this particular example, 100 points in 20 months. But by the way, there are a lot of other nonprofits and groups that are doing great things. They are not absolutely sure they get credit for what they're doing and that their data is enough. And what I think I'm going to confirm here is that through this proposed reform is one of the many things that goes away as a problem. Like success and failure gets clarified. Am I right about that?
That's correct.
And so we're not wasting a lot of time and energy trying to convince somebody to do something, not on the merits, but just whether they get credit for it, whether it's meaningful. And people are self-interested, let's just be honest, people are self-interested like bankers, and not going to do what they're not rewarded or encouraged to do. You guys won't say anything, I'm saying that. And we need to make sure that that the playing field is level and the rules are published.
That's right.
And then we hold them to high standards.
Right, and I think that's,
Good job.
one of the key components here is creating and publishing a list, so everybody across America, if you're doing something in your community, you can look at that list and say, this qualifies, I can take it to a bank and show the bank and make sure they're aware that they're gonna get CRA credit. But I think just as important is we've created an intake, where if it's not on that list, come talk to us and we'll give you a read before you make loan, so you know when the bank is considering doing the project, that there's no doubt you're gonna get CRA credit.
Yeah, so if somebody understands infotainment, we're at 15 minutes. Folks will start, eyes will start glazing, thinking this is some kind of a documentary or something. So somebody, if there's an end to the story, can we please start there? So no more speeches, no more crying, no more, we're gonna cut to the chase. I'm gonna list the misconceptions. I'm not asking you right now to speak to them. I'm gonna list some of them that I've heard about. Then we're gonna deal with gaming the system, and our attorney can help to address that. And then what I really love is I now understand what the checks and balances are, and I want to go over that. Let me deal with the gaming, the misconceptions first. Write these down, and put in the comments any others. Maybe I can get them to do another video to deal with those as well. One misconception: there's one ratio for the Community Reinvestment Act to have success. There's one ratio. By the way, for those of you not really clear on this, Community Reinvestment Act is almost like the civil rights bill for financial access and capital access and economic empowerment for the underserved. Go look it up. If you never heard of CRA, you're watching this for the first time. CRA, Community Reinvestment Act. We've been talking in code a little bit here. We assume that maybe you know what it is. It's really important. It's responsible for billions and billions of dollars.
$480 billion a year flow into
480 billion.
Across America off of CRA.
And
It's a big number.
So the first easy question is we hope to have more dollars flowing as a result of this, not less.
That's right.
Benefiting low to moderate income communities,
That's
not
right.
some rich developer.
Yeah, well, that's what certainty will do.
That's what certainty would do.
That's what certainty.
You guys hear that? All right. This is on record now. So I'm gonna just do this because it's easy. The perception is the big one. It's one ratio. That's wrong. Well, that is wrong, right? It's not one ratio.
It's not.
It's not one ratio.
So for regional banks, it's hundreds of measurements. For the large banks, it's thousands of measurements.
Yeah.
So-
Make sure you're speaking up,
Yeah.
Comptroller.
So for regional banks, it's hundreds of measurements. For the large banks, it's thousands of measurements.
That factor into their rating.
That's right.
That's correct.
All right. The only difference now is that the cloud, the gray area is gone.
That's right.
It's very precise.
That's right.
All right. Do
Both
not
units and dollars.
do not respond to the rest of these yet, because I just want to go through them. Increases redlining, lowers overall lower overall investment across America. Branches are not important anymore. Eliminates examiner judgment. That's wrong. Bank only has to pass 50% of the assessment area. 50% of the test. Only has to pass the CRA test for 50% of this assessment area. I got that right. Stadiums, NFL stadiums, funding one NFL stadium will allow you to comply with all CRA. By the way, wrong. Okay. Performance context doesn't matter, meaning the examiners don't have input. Actually, almost the opposite is true. So now let me go to the checks and balances. Checks and balances. Now you help me out here if I get this wrong. This is almost a legal definition. Units check dollars, and dollars check units. This is so important. I didn't get this completely. I knew their spirit, but I didn't know this specifically. Units check dollars, dollars check units. This is so important because what it's saying is writing a check alone in a low to moderate income community is not enough to get satisfactory for CRA.
Yes,
That's
right.
correct.
You've got to do units of involvement that connect with those dollars. So you have to do numbers of loans. So you can't just buy a stadium or do one anything.
Right.
And also, there is that those units have to be, as it relates to low or moderate income
100%.
100%.
borrowers, communities,
Yes.
etc. 100%. Okay.
In low to moderate is usually 80% of a median income in a geographic area.
So then somebody would say, yeah, but you guys have this in qualified opportunity zones. We know there can be rich areas. Okay, listen to me now. I'm just repeating what they told me. 70% of qualified opportunity zones, and you guys can blame me if you think this was a bad idea. I told this to somebody. I don't know who listened to who, but somehow qualified opportunity zones, I think they got a lot of input for this. And CRA now overlaps 70%. So why shouldn't they both cross-fertilize? But 30% of QOZs, qualified opportunity zones, are not in CRA areas, not in low to moderate income communities, and do not qualify
That is
for
correct.
That's
CRA.
right. That's correct.
You guys proud of me? Am I doing this right?
Yeah.
You're doing very well, John. You're doing a great job.
Okay. I'm so proud of myself. Like I get this.
Can I point out one?
If I can get this, anybody can.
John, can I point out one other thing,
Yeah.
which is the dollars check the unit is also important.
Yeah.
Because you can do a lot of small units, but if you never worry about the dollars flowing in, you can actually decrease the amount of money flowing into a community. So that is to say, you can start issuing $10 loans instead of $100 loans.
Yeah.
But if you did 1,000 $10 loans, right, versus 1,000 $100 loans,
Yeah.
the dollar amount is really important. So that's why we say the units check the dollars and the dollars check the units. Because if you just count units, that system allows people to up the units, but actually decrease the amount of money that's flowing into these poor communities.
And now let's talk about gaming the system or not gaming the system in relation to that very important dollars checks units and units check dollars. As I understand it, there's a performance context.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Why don't you, somebody explain what that means?
So performance context is just another term for examiner judgment.
Yeah.
So our examiners go in and they go to the banks and they look to see and make assessments on what it is that they've done to meet their CRA responsibilities.
Yeah.
So misperception is that examiner judgment will no longer count. And nothing could be farther from the truth. What we've had in the past is a system built primarily on examiner judgment with very little objectivity built in. What that leads to is inconsistency across the country. So
And it also leads to long exams.
Yeah.
Very long
So
exams.
somebody, so you can have somebody spend two years on an exam because it's all contextual,
Exactly.
right? Okay.
But you have, a mismatch, if you will, and what I've oftentimes found when I would read the PEs.
What's a PE?
That's a performance evaluation.
Yeah.
That's the report that our examiners generate. So you could see in those PEs where examiners would look at what a bank did, let's say in the Pacific Northwest of the country, and they would give consideration and credit for an activity that a bank did there.
Yeah.
But a bank in the southeast part of the country did the exact same activity, a different examiner did not give credit for it.
Yeah.
All right? So what we need is, understanding across the baseline of what those objective measures, where's the transparency of what counts, where you're gonna count it, and then allow examiners to take all of those objective measures that give us consistency across the country, and then apply their judgment, the context around what's happening in that local community that may have, let's say, prevented the bank from being able to make certain types of loans.
So let me be a cynic here. Somebody said, yeah, I hear all that. This is gobbledygook. Wait a minute. So I'm a lazy banker. I'm trying to check the box of my CRA, Community Reinvestment Act. I'm gonna go to some community development organization. I'm gonna buy 5,000 micro loans off their books for $5 million. I'm making this up, picking a number. And then I'm gonna, get my examination done. And then I'm gonna sell those loans to to whoever else needs to qualify next. Tell me why that's not doable. Why that's not possible.
So,
Why you can't game that system in that way.
so one thing, we're gonna have that same examiner judgment that's gonna come in and look at that and see what just happened and say, you're not gonna be able to just buy those loans for this exam because I see what you're trying to do. There's no new money going into the community that I'm looking at that you're trying to serve. If you went over to John and you bought loans from John's in California, but you bank in North Carolina.
Mhm.
So no, that's not gonna work because examiner judgment, performance context, knowing how the system is supposed to work under the new rules,
Yeah.
will not allow that.
So-
But
so-
we're closing a big loophole based on what you just said.
Yeah.
Because in the current
Listen now,
CRA,
listen,
what you just talked about, going to buy a pool of loans in order to meet your lending test
Yeah.
or to get that loan CRA credit
yeah,
is 100% permissible today.
You can do today what you just said.
did you hear that?
You're in California and you made loans or you bought loans from Barry, who's in Illinois.
Right,
Barry sells you loans for your CRA exam.
right,
You use those loans, you get 100% credit
right,
for your loan test.
right,
Val's getting ready to get his exam done in North Carolina. He calls you up, John, and he says, do you have loans to sell?
yeah,
You sell Val those loans.
right,
My examiners go in under today's rules.
yeah.
Val gets 100% credit.
So does Barry, so do I.
Yeah, but guess what? The
Multiple
loans
credit,
probably
yeah.
originated in Iowa.
And by the way, there's no new capital going in the neighborhoods,
Not
right?
one new dollar
Yes.
went into, let's see, Illinois, California, or North Carolina for loans that were originated in Iowa.
Now, I'm
There's
gonna,
something wrong with that.
yes, now that was a sister talking. There's something wrong with that. That wasn't the regulator. That was her from her soul. We're gonna do 4 more minutes on this session. I'm gonna stop. We're gonna do part 2 so we can break this up because it's so rich. I want everybody to get this. But Val and Grovetta educated me and Barry on this extremely important variance in here. You only get credit for how long the loan was on your books.
Yes, so that's the
Under
system.
the new
That's right,
review.
that's the system we're moving to. So the idea is to prevent all this gaming and no new money flowing in.
Yeah.
The way you do that is you sort of say, okay, you want to go out and you want to buy a loan, that counts, fine, good for you. But you bought it the week before your exam, you only get that week's worth of value. You don't get 3 years worth of value.
Please repeat that for those in the back of the room.
So you
For those in the back of the room who can't hear you.
That's right, so
Brian,
you only get credit for as long as you're holding it on your books, for as long as you're willing to put your capital behind the loan.
Right.
So that's a really important thing. So what it means is it's going to induce more capital to flow into the communities that need it the most. And that's the key part of this reform.
And by the way, I don't believe this is true, but it could be argued that if you have $100 billion of ghost capital versus $75 billion of this kind of capital, one could argue that this $75 billion is more valuable than the ghost capital is being, you're passing this to me, I'm passing it to somebody else, versus this is on somebody's balance sheet. They made a real investment. It's a real loan. That's real. And this is my perception of it.
Right.
Let me add one point to that. So today, because we give banks credit for originating the loan or purchasing the loan, and it doesn't really matter how long they hold the loan,
Yeah.
they just have to originate it during the exam period. That's what creates these incentives to game the system. As Bao said, now that we're making the banks hold those loans on their books and giving them credit for the length of time they hold them there, that's ensuring more capital goes into the communities. Also today, what we have is a situation where a bank might be incented to make more shorter term loans. A CDFI, an organization like Operation Hope, needs more patient capital for a lengthier period of time in order to maximize the impact on the community. So today we're unfortunately incenting banks to shorten the length and the duration of those loans and
right.
making more of those loans more frequently so that they can get more points on the books for CRA purposes.
So, go
What
ahead.
we will do is that we'll incent banks by lengthening the period of time that they hold them on those loans on the books and incenting them to make longer term, more patient capital to community development financial institutions, to nonprofits like Operation Hope, that will allow you to better navigate the deployment of capital into your communities.
So whether we're talking about an Operation Hope or an Urban League or an Raza or there's so many sort of national organizations United Way, all these folks involved in the space, all the list, all the way down to, I'm thinking about now, the local church I grew up in South Central LA, who had 50 members, and they want to do something. This does not disincentivize a bank from making a loan to the small church of 50, a loan or whatever, to 50 members. Let's say with a loan for a moment. And right now, as I understand it, this is not clear enough in this reform. I think you guys are going to go back and try to refine this, if I'm correct. But there are ways that the examiner can level the playing field for. I'm saying this is a statement. I'm asking a question. Comptroller, anybody wants. This is so important. There's a huge misperception that if you make data king and you do unit checks and dollar checks, that people will get lazy and want to do things at volume levels that are easy to do, which is probably right, okay? But we don't want the small little Willie that has a $25,000 loan, again, safe and sound. It's a safe and sound loan. But in order to get to a point where they're safe and sound, somebody's got to work with them.
Absolutely.
To get their accounting right, the numbers right, the application right, so they can get to a point and apply for the loan for $25,000. And in my view, there needs to be a credit, if you will. I'm not going to say this properly, for the bank or bankers.
Multiplier.
What you said?
A multiplier.
A multiplier. Okay, you got to take it from me. You know what I'm trying to say.
And the concept that we've been using on like the CDFIs or the low to moderate income housing on the equity side, people have said those are really tough to attract in the market with any significant term. And so our thinking in the NPR was, how about if we gave
Sorry, no one knows what an NPR is. And raise your voice just a little bit. I'm sorry.
Notice of proposed rulemaking
Right.
is that we would give you $2 of credit for every dollar that you did. So as you brought up this concept of the smaller loans that are more complex,
Yep.
we have to think through, should they also qualify for a multiplier? And those are the things in the notice of proposed rulemaking that we're eliciting feedback from people.
So it's not done.
Help us find
No.
the areas that you find challenging or don't dislike, but come to us with solutions for those.
Yeah, so by the way, we talked, and it was, in my opinion, it was a loving blind spot on one. I'm not going to get into specific. There was an item I raised that was a loving blind spot. They just hadn't thought about it that way. They thought about it not that way. And they were open to it. They're like, let's find a pathway forward. I'd encourage you to do the same thing.
So you know what, John, the thing about where we are, I think you started off the session here calling it like the open season.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where we are.
Yeah.
So we put out our proposal
Yeah.
for how you can bring a rule that, is dedicated to fair access
Yep.
and fair treatment
Yep.
of low and moderate people in need across the country.
Yep.
To have that entryway.
Yep.
A rule that hasn't been updated since 1995.
It was originally enacted in 1977.
Exactly. So in 1995, there was no internet.
John was wearing bell bottoms.
Hey, watch
John
it.
had on bell
I got
bottoms.
my first lesson in financial literacy in 1977 by a banker in Compton, California, who wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for CRA. White banker with a white, he looks sort of like you. White shirt, red tie, blue suit. And he was there. He didn't want to be there. He was there because he got credit for it. The bank told him to come. Thank God he came. It turned me into a little responsible capitalist and set me off on the road of becoming an entrepreneur. So it was good then for what it was.
Right.
And he did a software upgrade. That was 1995, is that right?
Yes.
95?
And now we're talking about another software upgrade, right? Thank God for the internet and did video. We can tell you exactly what's on their mind. You're on the guess.
Yeah, but what we're asking for, during this period, I think Comptroller said the comment period is open until March the 9th,
Yep.
2020.
Yep.
So we put out a proposal, but it's not a final rule.
Yep.
And we're asking questions, and we're having sessions like this, so
Yep.
you can bring issues that we may not have thought about,
Yep.
that gives us an opportunity. Pencils are not down.
Right.
In fact, pencils are still working right now, today, every day, I won't tell you how long I managed to keep these gentlemen up with emails, et cetera, through the, through the night as we think about
Wait a minute,
this.
you're not out of the loop? I'm like, you're not, they don't have the system out of the room. You're part of the process?
I managed to be in this process.
It's not just a wealthy Caucasian dude running this thing?
No, you gotta bring,
She's the boss.
She's the boss.
Yeah, but you know what this is about? This is really about understanding, what poor people's needs are.
Yeah.
And,
Amen.
maybe not everybody really appreciates it. All of the debates that are going on, all of the noise that you hear, the misperceptions that you're addressing, that you're talking about. But when you pull this all back and all that dust is settled, the beneficiaries of what we're trying to do are poor people across America.
Yep.
That's who we're doing this for.
Can I add just one thing that on this topic that I've heard the comptroller say to us a bunch of times about this process and where we are in the process? He said, look, if we go out and someone comes up with a better idea, I don't have a problem stealing that idea, because if it works, it works. And the point of all of this is to get something that works,
Right.
something that improves the lives of people. And so
Best thing in
that's
life
kind of where
is
we
copy.
are. That's
I mean,
right.
Steve Jobs and Bill Gates took their ideas from the IBM Park, in Xerox Park in Silicon Valley. And Dr. King used to say to pastors, he heard a great quote. He said, "Look, Joe, the first three times I say it, I'm gonna give you credit. The fourth time is mine. so feel free to steal good ideas. I'll give them some. I got no credit for it. It's all good. Yeah, I want CRA credit though. So we're gonna wrap this particular up because we're at 36 minutes, and we're gonna come back with part 2. I don't want to go get some coffee, go get some tea. Take a breath. There's a lot to absorb. I want you to watch this over again. I want you to share this video with others. Comment. This is open source. As you can see, there are no scripts here, and I'm wild, so they don't know what I'm going to say. One thing I do want to mention.
Maybe, John, one thing would be, Roberta, if we could share with them how they could make comments. Or
But,
where they could-
hold on, let's do the last comment, because I'm just going to say one last thing, and I'm going to give you guys the last word.
Okay.
We're going to come back at part 2. So number one, something I want to also say on these checks and balances. Data will be king in the new model. Whereas before, it was 80% examiner input and 20% data. Now it's going to be 80% transparent data, 20% examiner input. So everything's the same. It's just the data and transparency and clean rules and lines are more important. And there's an approved list for what qualifies under CRA. There has not been a list since 1977, right?
Ever.
Ever.
No, there's never been a.
That's one of the reasons I mean, so many other people have had problems. It's like hugging Jello. You can't get your hands around what qualifies and what doesn't, and so you need interpreters and translators, and everything's boutique. Now there's a list of 200 items which can be expanded.
That's right.
That's right.
That tells you specifically what qualifies under Community Reinvestment Act. Roberta, we give you the last word.
So, I think the addresses are regulation.gov. Thank you, Val. We are soliciting comments, and those comments can be written and put into the website. We will take snail mail if you wanted to send it to the OCC's address at 400 7th Street, Southwest Washington, 200.
20219.
Yeah, you're gonna have to edit all that together, but.
You better
we don't-
rewatch the video. go to the Comptroller of the Currency website.
There you
There you
go.
go. Knock yourself on. Just call Janae Roscoe.
And you know, the interesting thing, because you can find it on the website as well as in the Federal Register, so you can find this proposal, which we put out for people to see in both
And
places.
really, it's only about 20 pages you have to read of what the proposal is. There's a lot of reg text if you want to understand the history.
Yep.
So this has been page 1, part 1. We're gonna come back with part 2. So go get some coffee and or some tea, and we'll be right back with. We're gonna take the part 2 and try to supercharge this, try to condense it, punch it, and go right through. For those of you who don't have a lot of patience and a lot of time, we're gonna do CRA for dummies. I'm calling myself a dummy, not you. All right, I'm out. John Hope Bryant. This has been the Comptroller of the Currency OCC Roundtable on CRA, a modernization.